So I will now open the floor for questions. And for the first round, we'll just take 2 questions for the first round. Before you ask your question or make your comment, please state your name and organization before you ask your question. If you are making a comment, please try to limit your word count as much as possible, but the floor is now open for questions, and we'll have people moving around with the microphone. So we have a question from the front. So 1 question there and 1 question here at the back.
I'll go. Testing. I'll go first. Yeah, thank you. I'm George Bobby from the World Bank. Thank you, Dr. Haley and Mr. Goro and Mr. Pok for those insights. A colleague of mine is from Vietnam. Vietnam is a country we, together with PNG, in 1990 we were on the same development level. We've kind of moved down south to 158th place, and they're somewhere still in the 80s there. But on this topic, when we were discussing, he says a politician in Vietnam gets $500 a month. As you know, ours get about double that, not even double that. If you convert every allowances and things that our politicians get in this country, they get something close to about $20,000 US a month. That makes this a very lucrative business, no matter how you want to skin this. All of us here want to be a politician because that's where the money is. And that is something we must always remember at the back of this. We've made it so lucrative that we will apply every nook and crook to get there. And thank you for highlighting those. Those observations basically highlight this. And we all want to get there and get our share there because it's so lucrative to become a politician in this country. Now, with your presentations, what I've noticed, what I've heard from you, from Dr. Haley, is that you're looking at through the electoral process and the system. And that is the template through which we should look at what went wrong and how we should fix it. And the qualitative assessment from Mr. Goro is looking at how our voters will be, how they were organizing themselves to be able to get in the space. And thank you, Mr. Pok, for making so clear to us that I think our political parties and people, we need to clean them up. We need to make sure that they're the right people there and in the right institutions, right down where it matters to get in there. I'd like to put it to the 3 of you that while we look through the lenses of the electoral process and the system, there is this big messy space there, and that space is called political patronage, which influences the culture and which influences the voter behavior. That gets very messy. So with the data that you have and the information that you've collected, can you sort of, inductively or deductively get down there to be able to trap and perhaps canvas the behavior right throughout the country? And because like in the islands, obviously we live in tribes. So if I'm a candidate, I'm going to mobilize my tribe, and that's a given. Nobody challenges that. And in some communities, they don't. They live in individuals as individuals. But when you look through the political patronage lens, now that gets messy. It can even come back and destroy a tribe. Like you said, money talks. Money is king, Mr. Goro, in the highlands. So you can put your money, throw money down the family, you split the family up. So all those are sort of things that I know are a little bit messy to go to, but if you can reflect that in your reports going forward, because that'll put a lot of context to all of us trying to get in to get that lucrative piece of the cake up there in the political space. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bobby. We'll have our second question.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Varpik, and I represent the Catholic Professional Society and I'm standing in on behalf of our president, Paul Harrigan. We thank all the observers who have produced observations that have now been produced into books. And we are hoping, I think our general focus here is that we take all those observations that have been analyzed and change whatever we need to change so that come 2027 general election, that we mitigate all these issues. But however, my question is in relation to the analysis that you carried out. Maybe, in my view, maybe we should also carry out an analysis of the thought processes of the candidates. What motivates them to be politicians? The Electoral Commissioner mentioned earlier today that why do they want to be politicians? The answer is very, very easy, and my friend George Bobby has mentioned it. There's money to be made. There's money to be made. And in fact, I come from Mosby North East electorate in the city, and Port Moresby North East had the highest number of of candidates in the last election, 76. Every man and his dog wants to be a politician, simply because there is money to be made. Now, if we can, apart from analyzing the effects of the failure of the electoral system, we must also try to analyze the thought processes of the candidates as to why they are standing for election so that we can understand. Because if we drill in down to that, we can see the beginning of corruption. Because in the highlands and elsewhere, voting is along tribal lines. And that's where you breed corruption, because they take corruption into parliament. Their first duty is to reward the people who vote for them. So I think my question is, can the TIPNG and those observers maybe in future, can you look at that process to try and get into the thought processes of our candidates to see what motivates them? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll switch back to the panel to provide some commentary to those comments that have been expressed.
Looks like I'm making comment. Yeah, so I think obviously agree with the comments over here. Like there's massive incentives in terms of why candidates want to contest and get elected, not just around the funding and the allowances and that you allude to, but also the access to large amounts of development spending and various different things, which particularly the MPs can certainly influence through the DDAs, etc. Coming back to the comment over here, and I think it's an interesting one, and I think that you're right, that a lot of what motivates a lot of candidates is around getting access to resources. But interestingly, and I don't want to suggest that this is universal, however, have been involved in doing, and some of us here have been involved in this work, training women candidates, both before the 2017 election and leading up to this election and the LLG elections. And certainly we've partnered with IPPCC in terms of implementing that and through some workshops. Quite interestingly, as part of that process and through the training that we've done with women candidates, we've asked them explicitly that question around why do they want to contest. And what I've been struck by is that I think there are potentially a greater range of motivations that we see amongst women candidates for why they're wanting to contest. And oftentimes women candidates are highlighting and pointing out those sort of legislative roles that an MP plays. And I think with the, with PNG's decentralised system of service delivery provision, we've seen increasingly over the years that competition between those sort of dual roles that MPs play, both as sort of legislators, but equally contributing to service delivery in their electorates. And I think my sense is, and obviously I don't have entire data to back this up, that I think a lot of male candidates are motivated by, sort of the access to resources and service delivery sort of type aspects of the role. And women candidates tend to be more attracted to those legislative functions that are associated with being an MP. So I think you do raise an interesting point, and I actually think that my gut feeling, based on various conversations, is that I think that it's actually quite gendered in terms of the motivations that we see.
I think Dr. Bopi has raised a very important statement about the motivation for people to contest elections. I think it's also supported by Michael's thought about the thought process of the candidates. I think both of these statements are in line. The motivation for candidates, I think, going back past the independence, contesting a seat is basically to maintain the leadership in the society. But the recent development, when more funds are dispersed in the pockets of MPs, that leadership aspect of providing that leadership in the electorate is missing now. So people are now looking at on the side of how much money they can earn and to distribute among the supporters and the tribes. And that is basically one of the reasons why we're having problems in the elections. And I concur with you, it's right, that people are competing for the money back that is there. And I think unless we tie this money back to proper accountability system, to proper system of using the money, I think people will start changing the mindset and thought process of how to become the leaders. And I think they will provide the leadership they will provide. A leadership in general, they're supposed to be servant, they're supposed to be serving. Now it is not happening. It is the service leadership or servant leadership is absent. The leaders now seem to become big figures, big men, and there seem to be money bags around the members of parliament now becoming the treasurer and become the law enforcer and become everybody. So that motivates people to come up with their all kinds of actions to win the election, because at the end of the day, they know that all the spending will be recouped and all the troubles they went through will be compensated. So basically, I agree with Doctor and my friend Michael. I think we have to change this thought process. We have to change this mindset that you have to provide the leadership, a servant leadership, and not to become a leadership that carries money back around and to give to your supporters. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a very important discussion point, and it also forms the underlying basis as to why citizens first think of contesting elections. I would like to revert to a forum that we've conducted right after the return of writs, what we call the post-election community consultation forum that we've conducted up in the Highlands. And interestingly, LLG president from Kompia Mambum in the Enga province made a comment and said, can a parliamentarian bring a private member's bill to abolish the district support improvement program? And he gave his own reasons as to why he recommended that. And I thought it has a lot of value in what he has said, centered around what we're discussing.
That's where the corruption is, I agree.
Yeah, I don't want to comment more on the government structure and service delivery programs, but this was his comment, and he gave his reasons as to why he recommended that. And it has been captured in our election observation report, and we will support that observation. And also, we are doing a wider consultation on elections from the political parties' point of view. And if we see that the wider community demands the abolishment of the district support improvement program and the provincial support improvement programs, then we will recommend that. And you know, it will not be easy. As you know, we are benefiting from these programs, both positive development and negative developments as well. But I would like to put out to you that there's a concern, a growing concern within the community on that program. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll just jump in as well, because you mentioned TIPNG, and I presented earlier in the morning. Just to Mr. Pope's point, it's messy on 2 counts. So messy in the sense that in our data, we only ask the transactional question, was money exchanged for a vote? We don't ask the motive of, you know, why the purchaser and the seller engaged in a transaction. But it's certainly like a messy discussion. I say messy also because we had a discussion at the National Integrity Summit 2 weeks ago, and we had a panel on electoral issues with Anthony Regan from ANU and Dr. Webster from NRI, as well as TIPNG Chairman Peter Heitzi. And they were looking at the discussion around the political economy and the decisions that have taken place and some of the paths that Papua New Guinea has chosen. So the motives as well are messy in their own way. And the third way of it being messy is that the solution is also messy. So I think if you want to look at it, we have an ombudsman commission that requires a register of interest from, you know, MPs, leaders, and that's held with their office. And if there's a conflict of interest, they're required by our laws to declare that conflict of interest before they engage in decision. It's incumbent upon the police to investigate crimes. It's incumbent on the Office of the Public Prosecutor to prosecute. And it's incumbent on citizens to have an expectation of good governance. So it is definitely messy everywhere. So it's something that, you know, needs to be tackled holistically, fundamentally. I think to the point about TIPNG's observation and the need to interview candidates, that's the utility of having this kind of forum. Each observer group cannot cover all the different aspects of elections. TIPNG is focused on transparency and integrity of the processes and the application of the rule of law. The Integrity of Political Parties and Candidates Commission has its own focus, likewise with ANU and likewise with NRI. So the benefit of this kind of forum is to have these different observer groups complement each other and fill in some of those pieces. So where the IPPCC might be able to ask candidates that question, TIPNG might look at other areas. So it's a way of balancing out the ideas. I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Thank you, Yua. Okay, we'll take this 2-second lot of questions. So we have gentleman at the back from NRI and also Cardinal, His Eminence.
Thank you, colleagues. Let me start by actually appreciating the presenters. The data, the information you have provided, they are actually substantial to improving the process. I think a colleague is looking at me. My name is Olubenga Ige from NRI. Yeah, I have, 4 comments and 2 questions. 3 of the comments, we actually go to Nicole. 1 question to Nicole, 1 question to Jeremy, and I will throw the last question to Yuambari. Now, regarding the aspect you presented in your observation report, where you mentioned, one of the low points of the previous election in PNG, you mentioned large numbers of candidates, 3,340 in 2017, 3,620 in 2022. It would be good to provide information to you that, in developing economies where people see the easiest route to making wealth or creation of wealth as politics. So that is absolutely normal. So you continue to see the rise in the number of candidates. So if you ask me as a researcher, that is not a minus for PNG, but rather something that we must see, showing the reality of a cross-section of belief in the society that to them it seems one of the easiest way to create wealth, is involvement in politics. So that will actually be responsible for the increase in the number or the surge in the number of candidates, recorded in PNG elections over the years. Now, the quantitative findings from your team, it will be good if, with every sense of respect, to you, if the quantitative aspect of your findings are actually presented in the manner captured in the TIPNG report. Of course, when Yuambari was presenting, everybody was actually looking at the numbers, the statistics, but as a researcher, there are other things that I'm actually seeing. For instance, the statistics provided by TIPNG, if you ask me, to provide a model for next election, it shows me the areas where we had, pockets of violence, that we must develop an holistic security model, that will secure voters and the votes they have casted in the next elections. So if we look also at your presentation, we should be able to see such that we enable us to actually, plan in an holistic manner for future elections in PNG. And again, what was the nature of money politics, observed by your team? Now, of course, in the presentation of the Electoral Commission chief, he mentioned, how election has been monetized and a host of other related materials. In some countries or in a particular country of the world, situations regarding money politics degenerated to a level that voters will collect money, from virtually everyone that is actually seeking their votes, and they will vote according to their conscience. So when the politicians discovered that, no, it seems the money we're actually giving to the electorates are no longer fetching us votes, then they don't give the money, before each voter will cast his or her vote. So they will get an agent, the ballot paper will be given to you. Once you thumbprint, you will raise it up and show them that you voted for them, and after which you now come to collect the money. So it will be good, of course, they call it stomach infrastructure on that side, so and not money politics. So it will be good if you can actually provide an insight into the nature of money politics, involved. And this question goes to you as well. Can PNG have a separate voters register that is different from, the common roll that will have emanated from the census? In nations of the world where we have these peculiar problems, what such nations have done is they have population census as at when due, but voters registration will also take place, concurrently until elections are actually concluded. And to Yuambari, a very good report. I appreciate the data you've presented to us, and personally, I will be working with that particular data, to bring up models that can assist in this process. But for instance, you responded to my colleague that your instrument did not capture, some of those things he requested. So in future, it will be good, if you can think of validating the polling place questionnaire and the voter survey. So if you had validated it, prior to administering it, it is possible that some of your scholarly friends, might have been able to pick up some of these issues, which enable us to have, deeper insight than you have presented, regarding the elections. Thank you, colleagues.
I don't know. Oh, I'm going to forget that.
Okay, thank you, sorry. Okay, for me, I'd like to ask a question. This is in relation to the political parties. Now, Emmanuel, you have gave a good picture of the whole, all the integrity of political parties. And it seems as if, in every national election, there's always a new party created. And so in the last one, we have another 3 created. And now we are 54 political parties already. But what is really they are doing? And what is the reason for creating them? And you mentioned that the funding is a problem here. And so this is really a concern that should be regulated. But can there be a way of regulating this registration of new political parties and really bring it down to a level where it is manageable and where they are really contributing to the nation, rather than someone comes up with a new idea and so on. And I don't know who is really the one now, if you are the one in your organization really controlling this, can there be an introduction in the parliament to try to control this? And the other ones to control this, and of course, you will bring up a proposal for this to be done. So let us be serious about it. Enough is enough. We will continue to grow, and the number will we will come to a number where each member in parliament we have a political party. This is really something that is not really right. And I'm serious about it, because what is happening? What are they doing? And what is the reason of creating more and more while we are into really problems that are not solved? Thank you.
Thank you, His Eminence. So I'll switch over back to the panel now, I think starting with Dr. Haley.
Yeah, look, thank you for the comments over here. In terms of the presentation of our data, we will, when we have our final report, be presenting our data in that way. If you look at our earlier reports, we do exactly that, looking at the both the qualitative data, the observations made by observers, but also going quite deeply into the citizen survey information and looking at triangulating, both types of information in terms of formulating our views and our assessment on the election. And as I said, there's a huge amount of data there. In relation to that, over 10,000 people surveyed and different things. So we do, as Yuambari made the point, I think each of the observations here has slightly a different focus, right? But they all come together as various pieces of the same puzzle that allow us to look at different things. And certainly, whilst we didn't interview candidates as part of it, we did a citizen survey, and we've asked citizens lots of questions around their motivations, whether or not they received money, whether or not they feel obliged to vote for a candidate having received money for them, when money and gifts are offered to voters, whether or not they have the confidence to decline that money and those gifts. And again, the responses from past elections are very much gendered in that respect. The bottom line is, though, that people here don't feel like they have a secret ballot, and the reality is they don't in many, many places, right? So people are ill-inclined to take money and then vote according to their wishes, because a lot of the post-election violence we see is retribution because people have accepted money from a candidate or committed their vote in a particular way, and should they vote differently, there are consequences to that. Right? So the situation is different to the situation that you're describing, where voters will take money from lots of different candidates and then just vote for the candidate that they think is a good candidate, right? That would work if there was a secret ballot, but there's not. So that's the sort of reality of that situation. In terms of some of the things as well that we've asked voters about, and we'll have some data on this quite soon, is around what they're looking for too in an MP. What do they prioritise? What do they think is should be the primary role of the MP, whether that's the service delivery type functions or the legislative functions? So we're trying to tease that out a little bit in terms of trying to understand what voters are looking for in terms of that. We also ask voters whether they themselves as an individual have received, services, etc., from their MP, the former incumbent, or whether their family has, or whether their community has as well. So we're trying to understand the extent to which individual voters feel indebted to vote in particular sorts of ways as well. So whilst a whole lot of the questions that we ask from one election to the next remain the same, so that we've got, you know, a really good cross-sectional data set that allows us to compare, and we go back to the same electorate. So a whole lot of our core electorates have been studied for 4 elections. So we can actually, we have a big set of cross-sectional data that allows us to make those comparisons, although over time we've increased the number of electorates that we cover. And so we can add to that and add in sort of assessments on new electorates. One of the things that I would say, the number of electorates that we go to in each region is proportional to the population of the country living in those regions. So, however, the electorates that we go to have been purposefully selected to ensure that we have a representative mix of urban, rural, remote, and that we've also, so there's, anyway, there is a lot more that can be said around that. We've also, in the citizen surveys that we did this time, have tested citizens' thinking around, I suppose, some of the key issues that will face PNG in this term of government. So, you know, one of the reforms that we've heard bandied around by people is the notion of directly electing the Prime Minister. So we've actually asked that question to find out what citizens think about that, whether they would support a shift that would see voters vote directly for the PM. We've also asked voters specific questions around their views around, you know, whether or not they think that the PNG government should endorse or ratify, in a sense, the outcome of the Bougainville referendum. And then we went on and asked citizens what they felt would be, you know, if Bougainville was to become independent, what would that mean for them as an individual, and what would that mean for PNG as a country? So we've got a huge data set now looking at that, and the views and the responses that we got, not surprisingly, are very different in very different parts of the country. But again, you know, really trying to get to the heart of some of the key issues that people are thinking about and talking about, so that we know, so that we can take the pulse of the country on some of those issues.
Thank you, Dr. Aike. I think many questions or comments have been made. My question was not clear, but I will try to answer some of the, for your convenience. I think I already explained that our design was a qualitative anthropological observation design. So what happened is we asked the observers to see the actions of the candidates and the supporters and general movement of the people in the, so that's why we sent them out early, in 2 weeks before the polling. And then they followed up through the polling places. In my presentation, I mentioned about money moving mountains, not meaning big money given to the voters on the voting day. In Papua New Guinea, in the highlands, the geography of the highlands is very difficult to move around. So those candidates who have more money, they were able to cover more places. So that's what I mean by the metaphor, money moves mountains. So basically, they were able to travel to many places. So people with money were becoming very popular, the candidates with money were becoming very popular. So as a result, it also influenced their voting. People with money were able to collect votes here and there. People with very good ideas but no money, they were only refined to their own local communities. They get the votes only from that part of the area, and they didn't collect votes from other places. But like I said, we have to get this data from the master records from Electoral Commission to confirm the observations. So at the moment, I'm not in the position to provide you that what our observations are confirmed, approved, or disapproved. So it's too early to make that comment, but what I'm presenting to you so this afternoon is basically about the observations. But we got heaps of election reports from 1964 to now, and we are reviewing all the elections reports, trying to come out with the main message, which the problems that are occurring all the time, and bribery is one of the common problems elections have been facing. This election is just one of those elections observations, so we will come up with the main themes, what are common or prevalent occurring problems, and how we will recommend the mitigating strategies to rectify those problems before the next election. Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer his amendments. Cardinal Ribat, thank you for the very valid question and concern. We at the Registry of Political Parties, this is a common concern when we go to communities, when we engage in awareness programs. And also this concern comes from politicians themselves. Firstly, the Organic Law on the Integrity of Political Parties and Candidates, 2001, was framed in such a way that to promote political parties in this country and regulate their behaviors. That's how we see it. And we've revised the organic law, as I've said. It was ready in 2014, and there was lack of political will, and it's still in Parliament. The revised organic law addresses that issue. Because now when you register a political party, the political party is registered for life. There's no renewal fee or, things like that. So we see that the original organic law wanted to promote a democratic culture in Papua New Guinea where political parties are given prominence. Voters should vote political parties according to party policy lines, because political parties, they form government, not an individual member of parliament or independent candidates for that matter. So the original organic law, the organic law of 2001, promoted that culture. Okay, now that we've operated the organic law for 20 years now, by January 2023 will be 20 years of operating the organic law on the integrity of political parties and candidates. At the Registry of Political Parties now, we think that it's about time we revise and place some restrictions on the registration and deeply regulate behaviors of political parties in this country. And so your concern is addressed in the revised organic law. When the revised organic law is passed, we definitely know that the number of political parties will come down to maybe less than 10, because there are stringent provisions that will cut down political parties and increase of the requirements and standard of registering a political party. Currently, we can't stop political parties from registering to participate in this country. Will infringe the Constitution. It's your constitutional right to register an association and be part of an association. So political parties are associations. When they first register at the Investment Promotion Authority as associations, they bring the certificate to the Registry of Political Parties, and then they register as political parties if they want to participate in the politics of this country. So it's their constitutional right. But some rights are absolute rights. Some rights are qualified rights. Okay. So we now seeing the right to register a political party as a qualified right. Okay, and a right to participate and occupy public office should be a qualified right as well. You have to be qualified to occupy certain public offices. So that's a constitutional matter that we need to address at that level. But yes, that's recognized and appreciated as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pok. Please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists for this afternoon. I would encourage that you do look up the ANU reports. We at TIPNG reference the ANU reports for a lot of the observation data that we missed in our own report or we didn't cover in our report. And it is a comprehensive report from campaign period all the way through to return of writs. NRI is the same in that they've had reports since the 1960s, so there is a lot of information that's there in terms of key findings and recommendations from past elections. And the same with IPPCC, their reports are available online. And it is a very comprehensive report from the 2017 elections, but also to mention that the proposed reforms have been there for some time now, and I would encourage everyone to engage in this process. They are having to restart this process again in this term of parliament, so I encourage people to get involved in the consultations, because IPPCC have always been open to consultations and reviews and recommendations from other organizations. So I thank our panelists again. We will be taking a group photo of you just before you leave the stage. So I'll ask my colleague Yvonne up, but thank you, Dr. Nicole Haley from the Australian National University, Mr. Jeremy Goro from the National Research Institute, and Mr. Emmanuel Pok from the Integrity of Political Parties and Candidates Commission. Thank you very much.